Good morning, everybody. This is Craig Warren with Ramblings of an Old Fart podcast. I'm going to dispense with my normal little blurb about who I am and whatever. So most of them, if you've listened to my podcast, you'll know. But I've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, something I consider a very serious issue. So I'm just going to get straight to it, if that's all right with you. I've kind of titled this as Are Our Governments and Courts Forcing People into Non-Consensual Servitude? Or, my way of thinking, modern-day slavery. That's pretty serious, isn't it? Well, let me go and tell you a little story here and tell you why I got here. I started investigating and doing a report on judges. I have seen several, even in our state and across the country, judges behaving very badly. Criminals, all kinds of fraud for sexual assaults, all kinds of things. So I was going down and doing the research, and then I came across one case that just stopped me in my tracks. I thought, man, I have to look at this further and see. This can't make sense. It can't possibly be happening. So that put me right on the edge of this big old rabbit hole that I just could not. I just couldn't help but go down that road. And here's what I found. I'll tell you a little story about a mother of three, Marquita Johnson from Alabama. This is probably the most gut-wrenching poster child for the damage that our system can cause sometimes. It highlights how a minor administrative issue like parking tickets can be used to legally destroy a family. And let me tell you what I mean by that. In 2012, Judge Les Hayes from a court in Alabama sentenced Marquita Johnson to 496 days in jail. Her 3 children were taken by the state and put in foster care. Her only offense? You'd think, God, she's got to be some kind of a criminal, right? No, failure to pay parking fines and traffic tickets. Couple $100, $200-$300 or something. The sentence, for comparison though, that sentence is actually longer than the average sentence for like negligent homicide or something like that in the state of Alabama and a lot of other states. Here's how this all happened. Of course, she went to court. She had the tickets. She had to go to court because she didn't have the money to pay it. She went for the judge. So the judge, what he did, where she didn't have the money, he placed her in what they call private probation. This is through a company called Judicial Correction Services, JCS. This seems really, really wrong right on the outset. But not only did now she owe the fines, and she's going to have to figure out a way to pay those back within a certain time frame, but now this company here is adding their own fees. She has to pay for this service, right? And, of course, anybody with any common sense would realize she couldn't pay the fees up front. And she how in the world, by adding more fees to her already overburdened situation, does it make any sense? And I don't think it did make sense because I think this was a plan all along. This is a system. Okay, so after a few months when she couldn't pay the fees and she couldn't pay the monthly fee for this company, they reported her to the judge, who then, through little legal loopholes, sent her to jail, right? And here's how that worked. Because now, because this isn't considered, it's considered an administrative issue and not a criminal issue. So, under that circumstance, they didn't have to provide an attorney for her to represent her. And this is not accidental. Like I said, this is an intentional system that they use to raise money off the backs of the poor people. And it seems like there's absolutely no care for the damage that it causes. I call it government hostility. It's what I call it. While the specific details of Marquita's daily work schedule are less publicized than the sentence itself, in the Montgomery City Jail, where this all took place, and the Alabama Department of Corrections during that time frame, they were notorious for their community work programs. In these systems, inmates were often required to provide community service, labor, such as janitorial work, or washing city vehicles, police cars, that kind of stuff, or work on highway cleanup to earn credit towards paying their fines. This money is not paid directly to the inmate, though. It's a credited system where they credit a certain amount back to this account that will be used to pay fines. But it's well below minimum wage, sometimes as even low as $2 to $10 a day for what they do. And while they're working off their fees and their fines at this so-called $10 a day rate or something, they're immediately wiped out because the jail where they're being housed charges them room and board fees. So she can work all day long, but the credit she earned would be immediately wiped out by the cost of the bed she slept in at night and the meals she ate. Sounds like a horrible system, doesn't it? And this is where this is where the podcast is going to really hit you in the heart. This is where we come down to the damage caused, like I mentioned. Because Marquita was a single mother, of course, when she was going to be in jail, the state took her kids, put them in foster care. But reports and subsequent lawsuits revealed that while in foster care, one of her daughters was sexually molested, sexually abused, and another one was physically abused. Marquita later remarked that Judge Hayes didn't just sentence her, he sentenced her children. And even after she was released, she had to fight a second legal battle with the Department of Human Services to get her kids back. And by the way, this Judge Hayes, when he was finally kind of reprimanded a little bit, they sentenced him to an 11-month suspension. But in an interview, he said, well, until they came and talked to me, I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. That's what he said. Taking a mother's kids away from her over traffic tickets or a parking violation, and he didn't see anything wrong with that. Destroying the children by putting them in foster care where they were molested, he didn't see that there was anything wrong with that. We need to somehow have a better vetting process for these judges. I'm just saying. But the other part of this, in one of the interviews I read from Marquita, she said that for months after she got her children back, that even if she stepped out the door, even for a minute or two, her kids would freak out thinking that she might not come home, might not come back. But that judge didn't see that was a problem. Okay, in Marquita's case, it proves my theory that this is modern-day slavery, pure and simple. You can disguise it or call it non-consensual or whatever you want, but it's modern-day slavery. The company, this JCS, tried to extract money from her that she didn't have and add more money to the already serious problem for her. And then the judge basically coerced her into making payment or go to jail. She couldn't make the payment. The family was destroyed, creating a new generation of traumatized children who are now more likely to end up in the same system later. In Marquita's own words from her later interviews, she said, "I was treated like a criminal because I was poor. They took my kids, they took my life, and they did it all for a few parking tickets. For a couple $100, basically." Based on the most recent data from the Prison Policy Initiative and the Fines and Fees Justice Center as of early May, the scale of cases like Marquita Johnson's is far larger than a few high-profile headlines. While Marquita's specific sentence, the 496 days, is an outlier in the extreme, the debt trap that she was caught in is a daily reality for hundreds of thousands. Did you get that number? Hundreds of thousands. See, this Judge Hayes, when I looked through the information there, he had sentenced by just him alone, hundreds of poor people just like her. So I started looking, how many people could this possibly be, and where are they, kind of a thing. On any given day, the incarcerated population is around 470 to 500,000 people that are sitting in jail somewhere. Some of them maybe they're just a day or two waiting to come up with bail or, something like that. But recent estimates that thousands of people are jailed every year for failure to pay fines and fees and court costs. In a single study that covered just 3 states, Texas, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma, courts were jailing people for debt at a rate of over 50,000 times a year. Beyond those already convicted, nearly 450,000 people are jailed every night solely because they're too poor to pay, afford cash bail, like Marquita. They're legally innocent, but effectively imprisoned because they're poor. Although Marquita is the extreme, let's kind of get an idea of maybe where the average is here. And the research that I found shows that 1 in 3 Americans, that's 1/3, reported owing court-related fees and fines within the previous 10 years. It sounds like a big deal. But that's what's happened. These places are weaponizing that against the people. That's the way I look at it. Approximately 17 million households with children have had to cut back on basic food, basic needs, medicine, rent, etc., because of court debt. Over 40 states. Now this is one of those things where I scratch my head. How do these people be so stupid? In over 40 states, they still suspend driver's licenses for unpaid court debt. This often forces people to drive without a license, take a chance on getting caught, leading to more tickets and more fines. And eventually, they may be the same kind of jail sentence that Marquita faced. But what sense does it make if you're trying to get them to pay fees, but yet you take away their ability to work in a lot of cases? I mean, a guy can walk, but he can only walk so far to get to his job, right? But, I mean, I don't know if there's some way you can work out maybe some restrictions so that they can't just be driving willy-nilly, traveling around, wasting gas money. But, yeah, it just seems stupid to take away their ability to work unless you truly want to lock them up and have them work for you. I don't know any other choice there. But there are roughly 50,000 people a year who find themselves in a jail cell because they couldn't pay a fee. Most only stay a day or two, but for people like Marquita, the system decides to keep them until their lives and their children's lives are completely destroyed. That's not a mistake. It's a feature of a business model, a revenue machine with no concern for the damages it causes. The system isn't broken here. That's what I said. This is a system. It's not, on the surface you think, God, the system must be just horribly broken to cause this kind of trouble. But no, it's designed that way because it's a $27 billion a year business machine, right? Total, all these small little communities where they set this up, there's a $27 billion revenue there, source that they're tapping into. The problem is the Marquita Johnsons of the world now represent the family tax, right? And it's estimated that between these families that get involved in this, there's a $348 billion annual loss in wealth and stability for those working class families. I'm not sure that's a very good trade-off. You collect $27 billion, but you cause a $348 billion loss of revenue and loss of income for these poor people. I'm not sure that's a very good trade-off. This is kind of like, I've talked about this before, like the fox guarding the hen house thing. Without independent oversight, these judges and attorneys and all of these people, they get away with it because the only oversight is by another judge. And as we can see, this Judge Hayes been doing this for years and years before somebody else finally stepped in and said, hey, you got to cool it a little bit. I don't see how that makes any sense. All the while, children, they're the ones paying the ultimate price in the foster care system. From the time as far back as I can remember in school and whatever, everybody was talking about our basic rights a little bit. And you're always told if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. But for Marquita Johnson and the other people involved in this kind of a mess, that promise has an asterisk by it. See, the system didn't just immediately put her in jail when she came before the judge. No. She was already drowning in debt. She couldn't pay the fees. So then they put her into this private probationary thing, further exacerbating her situation because she had to pay fees for them. But here's the thing. They didn't just throw her in jail because, this was an administrative thing. They just turned into a mountain of paperwork and a whole bunch of stuff that she didn't understand. This is where the system gets very clever with how they skirt the Constitution here. Here's the reality of the counsel gap in these cases. This goes back to the 13th Amendment, by the way. The 13th Amendment, of course, was the one that ended slavery. But it came with a but, or an exemption, if you will. Under Gideon versus Wainwright, you only have a constitutional right to court-appointed attorney if there is a threat of jail time. Okay, so most traffic and municipal offenses are classified as fine only, non-jailable at the start. Okay, this is how it works. Because there is no immediate threat of jail, the court is not required to provide you with a public defender. However, the jail time comes later during a contempt of court or a probation revocation thing. See, they sent you up on this private company under probation, and you have to meet these certain things. You have to pay your fees. You have to pay their fees. And when you can't do this, then you get called back into court. But by this time, it isn't about the traffic ticket anymore. It's about failure to obey a court order. In Marquita's case, and many others like it, the court often treats these debt hearings as administrative rather than criminal, which we talked about. So, if it's not criminal, you don't have the right to an attorney. And you can't sue a private company, or a private company can't put you in jail for debt collection. Only only a court can do that, right? But Marquita, because she didn't have a right to an attorney, or at least according to them, not a court-appointed one, but anyway, they don't know their rights, right? They didn't know that they had there was options like an ability to pay hearing under Bearden versus Georgia, another Supreme Court case. But without a lawyer to step up and say, hey, Your Honor, my client is indigent and cannot legally be jailed for this debt, the judge just simply signs the order and off she goes to jail. That seemed like a horrible thing, right? You would think that they would have a public responsibility to make that suggestion, but no. That would mess around with their revenue stream here, wouldn't it? In states like Alabama and Georgia, companies like this Judicial Correction Services often act as the judge, jury, and the collector in a lot of ways. The judge is just there to sign the document, kind of thing. Because this JCS is a private company, a lot of the meetings don't take place in the courthouse, right? The defendants are in private offices at this company's main office building. There are no lawyers present, no notes of the meeting taken for permanent records. So they can threaten, do all kinds of things there that nobody else knows about. And then they also send letters threatening jail time if fees aren't paid. And most people don't realize that a private company can't legally send you to jail, right? Only a judge can. But here it's a foregone conclusion. If they report back to the judge, he's going to sign off and send you to jail. That's what it seems like. So if you look at where the work issue comes into place, is inmate labor. This is mostly entrenched in I don't know how to say this exactly, but the map shifts a little bit when you think about this. It's mostly deep-rooted in agriculture and industrial prison programs. One of them I found real interesting in Texas. They imprison people, but they don't pay them anything. They just have to work off their room and board stuff. And when they get done, they still have to pay fees, it sounds like. But in Alabama and Louisiana, here's something I found even more reprehensible than what we've already talked about. These states are currently under fire from the federal government for what they call convict leasing. They basically use the inmates as a temp agency, right? The inmates are often leased out to private companies, fast food chains, poultry plants, or whatever, and they get paid an absolute minimum little bit, while the state charges the full fee to these places and keeps the money to cover administrative costs. That sounds like slavery to me. You are no longer a person. You are an asset to be leased out, to be worked for your own benefits or to be leased out. I don't know any other way to say that. I remember, as I was going through this, I remember it going back, and there were terms like shanghaied, right? And those were things that happened back in the 1700s, right? But this is a whole lot like that when you think about it. Just like Judge Hayes used contempt of court as a legal justification to jail Marquita, for a year, the British Navy used what they called impressment warrants. It looked like the law on paper, but in practice it was just a way to harvest free labor from the poor. This isn't a whole lot different than that. And back in they called at points at too in the before we became a country, the British had other means too. They used impressment warrants, right? But we think of press gangs as a relic of the 1700s, where our men would go out and grab people off the street and drag them out onto a boat, and they were out on the sea, and now they were the newest member of the Royal Navy, kind of a thing. The musket has been replaced with a gavel, and the ship has been replaced by the jail. But the goal is still the same. You take a person with no power, call it legal, and force them to pay for a system that they didn't ask for, that they didn't want to participate in, and they weren't guilty of any kind of a crime. But, see, that didn't matter. But this is exactly what this private probation thing is like in Alabama. Also, during the American Revolution, the British also had other things rather than just the impressment warrant, pressing people into the Navy service. They had writs of assistance. There were general warrants that allowed these officials to search anyone, anywhere, at any time, checking for smuggled goods, of course. But the truth is, it was just to raise revenue. The government stopped caring about justice and cared only about filling the king's coffers. It turned every transaction between a citizen and an official into a financial confrontation. And that's what I see a lot today. There's some very, very close similarities here. And I look at this, I've been thinking about this for a while. I had thought about doing this as even a podcast. It seems like our governments are becoming a lot more hostile towards the citizenry. I don't get it, And we're all supposed to be on the same team. They're just supposed to kind of be looking out for us. But I see a hostility. I'm not sure where that's all going to end. Okay, but we're seeing this all over the place. These same kind of things. Maybe not quite the same as Marquita's, but we have revenue traps where small towns are setting up these speed traps to collect money, right? No. Because they are truly speed traps. I know of one in a city not far from me where it's in very mountainous country, so there's some steep downhill. So they set up just around the corner at the bottom of the hill where they know people are going to be coasting enough to put them just above that legal limit where they can write tickets. The last time I said, they've kind of had some blowback on this, and there's been some legal action taken against them, but the last I heard, they were almost 40% of their budget was tickets, right, from these speed traps. Funny thing is, the police chief in that small town is also the mayor. So I'm pretty sure that the more tickets you write, the more salary you can get. That would make sense, right? So I just hate these things. But once a police department or a court is told that their salaries depend on the number of tickets they write or the number of cases they settle, like Marquita's, they no longer see the citizens as a neighbor to be protected. They see citizens as a revenue unit to be harvested. And that's where we're at. And this is what's worrying me a little bit about this. You guys know I like history as well, right? I follow the money and I like to follow history. James Madison, I've talked about him before many times. He warned us that when the law becomes a trap that a normal person can't navigate, the government has essentially declared war on its own people. Right? That's why I say hostility. That I don't know any other way to say it. I was always raised to believe that the police and the judges, they were there to keep the peace, keep us safe, and ensure justice. But when you look at the balance sheets of a lot of these small towns, you realize that justice isn't what they're really after. It's the blood money. We've gone from being citizens to being a revenue source. So you think, we like to think the Marquita Johnson was just a tragic one-off situation from a decade ago. But as we sit here in 2026, the crimp, or this, I don't know what else you'd call it. It's like some kind of a scam, I guess is the only other way to say it. But now it's not gone away. It's just gone digital and high tech. Because now we've traded iron bars for ankle monitors that cost $30 a day to the person wearing it. You know, the blood money's still flowing from the pockets of the poor into the coffers of the state or the cities. The press gangs, for reference, they didn't retire. They just got a software upgrade. In the South, like in states like Alabama and Missouri, Georgia, they still have high concentrations of these municipal traps, where 20% or more of the town's budget comes from fines and fees. But we're also seeing this move into more rural areas, like in the Midwest, like in the Mountain West, including places like Idaho and Wyoming, where local tax bases are shrinking and the court system is being used to bridge the budget gap. Over 40 states still have laws on the book that allow jails to charge inmates for their room and board. You haven't been convicted of crime. You haven't been judged by anything, but they can still charge it. They're holding you there against your will, but they can charge you for being there. Makes no sense to me. But here's how it might look. Even if you're only in jail for, say, 48 hours, you can be hit with a $200 booking fee and then at least $50 a night for your stay. When you can't pay that bill upon release, then it becomes a civil judgment like Marquita, that situation. Your driver's license can be suspended, creating the exact same Shanghaied system or cycle that Marquita faced. Data shows that the $27 billion is still being extracted from the bottom 20% of the population. I said it was poor people, and that's exactly what the numbers show. It's from the lower 20% of the population. The Marquitas are still out there. They're just quieter now because the system has become more efficient in silencing them. I've got a couple of quotes here that I think are very appropriate for this podcast, and then I'm going to call it good. I think that's enough for one time. That should make you mad enough already. Okay, Frédéric Bastiat, a French economist, wrote extensively about how governments use the law to do the very things the law is supposed to punish, like theft. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. That was from The Law in 1850 by Frédéric Bastiat. Under the pretense of governing, they have divided their nations into two classes, the wolves and the sheep. That's Thomas Jefferson in a letter to Edward Carrington in 1787. And I think that's where we're at. They seen it coming. We should have seen it coming too, I guess, but it kind of creeps up on you slowly. I'm going to call that good for today. I thank you for joining me. Please join me next time. God bless and keep you. This is Craig Warren, Ramblings of an Old Fart Podcast.